Today, I intend to focus on Frances Wright's reception of Wollstonecraft's idea of liberty. Indeed, she was able not only to metabolize Wollstonecraft's idea, but also to enrich it by giving concrete form to the principle of liberty, understood in the Republican sense as non-domination. Furthermore, the analysis of her troubled life and her works, which over the years were somehow consigned to oblivion, serves well as an exemplary case to highlight the ostracism to which many women were subjected, particularly those who dared to rebel against the model of angel in the house, that was and still is strictly associated with the image and role of women. In her writings, it is possible to identify a variety of different influences: Scottish Enlightenment, English radicalism, according to Paine and Wollstonecraft, Harringtonian republicanism, as well as Owen's cooperative socialism. She used these sets of ideas and practices to highlight the improvements she considered were needed in her contemporary society. On her return from her first trip to the United States, a place she thought was a utopian land, she published a book, Views and Society, of Society and Manners in America, in which she does not balk at identifying imperfection in an albeit advanced model of society for the time. The two main flaws in the model that Wright pointed to and said needed to be rectified were the inferior status of women and the scourge of slavery. These two iniquities so undermine the widespread application of the principle of liberty and equality because they disavow the plurality of voices in society. During a second journey to America in 1824, she visited the southern states to deepen her understanding of the problem of slavery. It was then she decided to abandon her role as a writer, to become a popular reformer. She decided to found Nashoba, a community for ex-slaves, provide them with both an education and the opportunity to learn a trade that would enable them to pay their own way after emancipation and to make a living for themselves outside the community itself. Despite the careful planning involved in the setting up of a school, building canteens and shared housing, creating farms for rearing animals, and cultivating various kinds of basic foodstuff, the community struggled to become productive. Further, the area around Nashoba was a malarial zone. Frances herself fell gravely ill for several days and indeed almost died. In order to recover, she went to Europe. In Frances Wright's absence, however, one of the owners of Nashoba, James Richardson, decided to write a detailed account of life in Nashoba and to publish it in the anti-slavery journal, The Genius of Universal Emancipation. Richardson had clearly underestimated the critical reaction that his article would incite. Indeed, he gave a plain description of how black and white children were educated together and how sexual relations outside marriage, even between people of different color, were permitted, provided that they were consensual. The journal's editor Landy was so shocked and outraged, in particular at the idea of white and black children attending the same school, and the revelations about sexual promiscuity, that he referred to Nashoba as one great brother, disgraceful to its institutors. Landy expected Wright to make a stand condemning Richardson's revelation. Instead, she wrote an article entitled Explanatory Notes for the New Harmony Gazette, in which she not only did not make clear any disapproval of what Richardson had written, but she also reaffirmed the principle that she saw as important to both defend and to apply in practice. It was the chance to promote real Republican liberty and to criticize the arbitrary power of the institutions of the law and the tradition. In the USA, asserted Wright, people have political liberty, but moral liberty exists nowhere. And this was important to underline. By political liberty, we may understand the liberty of speech and of action without incurring the violence of authority or the penalty of law. By moral liberty may we understand the free exercise of the liberty of speech and of action without incurring the intolerance of popular prejudice and ignorant public opinion. She went on to affirm that liberty and equality have to work side by side, because liberty without equality, what is but a chimera? That's why means shall be sought and found and employed to develop all the intellectual and physical power of all human beings, without regard to sex or condition, class, race, nation, or color. In Wright's article, however, a reference to the importance of the principle of liberty and equality did not arouse indignation. What provoked outrage was how she interpreted this principle and allowed them to be represented in the community of Nashoba. Her ideas on marriage were particularly radical for the time. Husband and wife were considered two independent individuals with equal rights and duties. No woman can forfeit her individual rights or independent existence, and no man can assert over her any rights or power whatsoever, beyond what he might exercise over her free and voluntary affections. Her view was that, as it was conceived at the time, marriage had probably its source in religious prejudice or priestly rapacity. Wright believed that rules of morality should be rewritten to pursue human happiness, rather than the repression of passions. In the moral, intellectual, and physical cultivation of both sexes, should we seek, as we can, only find the sources and security of human happiness and human virtue. Prejudice and fear are weak barriers against passions, which inherent in our nature and demanding only judicious training to form the ornament and supply the best joy of our existence, are maddened into violence by pernicious example and pernicious indulgence. Wright was also highly critical of and who often targeted religion, which was commonly used as a parameter for moral rules. Wright states without hesitations that religion has no role in the community of Nashoba. The Nashoba experiment was officially considered to have ended in 1830. The community she founded for the liberation of the black failed, tarnished by a moral condemnation that also damaged Francis. She was considered guilty of taking a stand, albeit not explicitly, against the traditional institution of marriage, as well as against state religion and white supremacy. Subsequently, she became convinced that the cause of American evils lay in oppressive religious morality and the lack of freedom reserved for specific categories of the population. Therefore, she gave a series of public lectures around the United States to explain her idea of liberty. She spoke in New York, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, in front of a broad and enthusiastic audience, but she also aroused the wrath of the conservatives who found ample space in the press to criticize her. A woman who spoke in public was revolutionary in itself, if we added to this the fact that Fanny's ideas undermined the consolidated foundation of religious moral that over the centuries had not only been propagated but even strengthened. It is possible to imagine how, alongside an enthusiastic public, there was another critical and strongly worried one. The role of women had always been that of guardian of the values of purity and modesty, a sort of universal archetype that spanned eras, cultures, and religions, and that attributed and restricted to women only a few legitimate roles, that of mother, wife, or accommodating woman. So if women respected the limit imposed on them, they could hope for a sort of paternalistic respect. Otherwise, they became the object of reprobation by men and also by other women themselves. She was called the Red Harlot, the devil in the house, but she was only a human being that tried to use her rationality to reform a society she wanted to be free and equal, but it was instead a bigoted and unhappy one. She died alone, abandoned even by her daughter, who never shared her battles.